So this is Anto's go home video. We trained her in Spanish, which is something new for me personally. I think something new for you too, right, Gina?
Yes.
We do French and German often, but Spanish definitely has us thrown for a loop. It's always fun to train a dog in multiple languages because that's what they end up getting. So Anto is about a 7-month-old German Shepherd or German Shepherd mix. She is definitely a nervous dog. A lot of the work we've done with her is just exposure, aside from all the obedience that we normally do. Was a bunch of exposure, helping her work through a lot of her nervous stuff. So what we see with a lot of nervous, especially young dogs that are nervous, they have shown nervousness and kind of get taken out of the situation because they showed some nervousness. Generally what we find is if you help a dog work through situations where they're nervous, they come out the other side a lot better. So if they just get to avoid things through nervousness, it kind of turns into a learned behavior where they get nervous, they shut down, and they refuse to do anything. Where you can take situations where they just get a little bit nervous, like if they're weird about going through a certain doorway, you can kind of just kind of coax them along through that doorway and do that a few times. And just little things like that actually really help dogs work through that nervousness, and they begin to learn that just because they're nervous doesn't mean that the world is out to get them. Just because they're nervous doesn't mean that they get to just completely shut down and not do what we're asking them to do. So right there was a really good thing Gina did. Gina saw that Anto was kind of focusing in on the ducks, which is a pretty normal reaction for a dog when they're 10 feet away from walking ducks. And so Gina did a quick 180, which forced Anto to pay attention to what Gina was doing more. So if you break a dog's focus, if they're focused on something we don't want them to be focused on, we can break that by using our obedience and making the obedience different in that moment so that the dog has to pay attention to us. And if they don't pay attention to us, then we can communicate with them that, hey, nope, you did this wrong. We can tap them with the e-collar or the leash or both, preferably both. And then that way we break their focus on whatever they're kind of, starting to hone in on. If you just let a dog hone in on something, that's going to kind of build this anticipation more and more and more. Especially with shepherd breeds, it kind of, grows and grows inside of them. And then at a certain point, they're going to react. So if we can break that focus before they react, it's a much better habit to set up than waiting until they react to break that focus. So we always want to pay attention to our surroundings. We want to pay attention to what's going on. We really want to pay attention to what's going on in the dog's head. If Anto's staring at something for a super long time, we know, like, oh, she's paying attention to something else, not us. So she's not doing the proper obedience. So we can help her with that. So when we get out to parks like this with tons of distractions, we want to make our walks really engaging. We don't want to just walk in a straight line. We don't want Anto to just be able to pay attention to whatever she wants to pay attention to. We really want to keep her focused with us, and we can do that with these sits, downs. We can do that with a bunch of turns. Those turns are actually really good while healing. Turns and really quick stops are a really good way to make sure that the dog has to pay attention to us because they don't want to be wrong, right? Most dogs. And on top of that, the dogs really get a bunch of fulfillment out of walks that are similar to what I just described. So if they're really fun, engaging walks where we're doing a bunch of different stuff, it's really not repetitive. We're doing turns, we're stopping, we're making her use her brain a bunch. Dogs enjoy that a lot more, and at the end of the walk you'll see a different dog, right? You'll see a dog that is much more mentally exhausted, mentally tired, which is ideally what we want from a walk where they have to use their brain a bunch. If we go on a half an hour walk and the dog is not mentally tired or not mentally exhausted, we know we weren't doing enough obedience in that walk, and heeling in a straight line is pretty easy for dogs, so we like to switch it up and make it more difficult, especially nervous dogs. So with nervous dogs, the more we switch those things up, the more turns we do, the more sits and everything else, the less and less and less that the dog is actually able to pay attention to everything else that's going on around them. And the less they get to pay attention to that stuff, the less they notice that stuff, kind of you'll actually start to see their nervousness slowly kind of dissipate, because they just don't see it anymore. They're around a bunch of stuff, different distractions, but they're not paying attention to it. And because they're not paying attention to it, because our obedience is so engaging, they actually start to not notice those things nearly as much.
Sorry, totally messed up on my Spanish there.
Gina's fluent in Spanish, as you can tell. So Anto's made a huge amount of progress, which we love to see. Anto's gonna be one of the dogs that through really good maintenance and good obedience will just continue to get better and better and better. That's what's so awesome about getting these dogs super young, 6 months old for pretty much fully off-leash obedience is awesome. We can set up some really good foundation for the rest of her life that is only going to build on itself if it's maintained and kept up with. If you have a dog that got away with those nervous reactions, for 5 years or 3 years or, even 1 year, that dog is going to have a lot harder time kind of learning to not pay attention to the rest of the world. Something that's really important with Anto is that we don't let dogs come up to her. We don't let people come up to her. We just want her to have us in our bubble. And when you're in our bubble, a good 3-foot berth, nothing comes inside of that bubble, so that we're not going to stress her out. We will manage that with just, someone comes up and says, hey, I want to pet your dog, and just, nope, sorry, we're training today, and continue on our way. Our dogs, first off, we never know how people are going to react or what people are going to do to dogs. A dog that's a little bit nervous like Anto, if someone just walked up to her and stuck their hand in her face really fast, she's not going to bite somebody at all, but she's going to react and retreat, and she's going to be scared. And so that's the exact type of situation that we would like to avoid if possible. The more we can get Anto out into the world where she feels invisible and the rest of everything else around her seems invisible, the better it's going to be. So we've done a ton of that with her out at the park. We've been to this park, I think, 3 times now. This park in particular, which is awesome. There's always a ton of distractions here. So with a dog like Anto, really with all the dogs, but nervous dogs also, we also want to end our sessions with a ton of food. So we just want to feed Anto a bunch. We don't necessarily need to do a ton of obedience. We're just gonna feed her, help her have a really good experience in this new place. We want her to pay attention to us and the food. So this is just kind of a time where we can get her in a little bit higher state of arousal, and she's still ignoring everything else going on in the world. And so this helps her blow off some steam from the hard walk that we just did. This is a great time to practice recalls. This is just a time for, dogs to have a little bit more fun. This is just a really great way to kind of end the walks. So awesome. Anto, we're gonna miss you, Mama. Wee! Yeah!